Welcome, everyone, to our second reading of Nietzsche's The Gay Science. We will be beginning this week with the section on the prelude in German rhymes: joke, cunning, and revenge. Rumpel, do you actually want to start us off?
Take a chance and try my fare. It will grow on you, I swear. Soon it will taste good to you, and if by then you should want more, all the things I've done will inspire things quite new. And there is a footnote here from Kaufman noting one, the modesty of the first three lines is striking. Literally, the fare will taste better tomorrow, and good only the day after tomorrow. I think I might have mentioned this last week. So in the original German, it's about wagt's mit meiner Kost, ihr Esser. Esser is someone who's an eater. So it's the poem is set up in a pretty, there's a directness about eating and consuming food. Um,
Right,
the
yeah. Much more of a
physiological kind
visceral.
of visceral, yeah, yeah, good word. Yeah. So it's kind of like an invitation, but it's sort of utteral in the sense that it's kind of like in the same way that like the hospitality of someone who wants to serve you their local food along with a drink as you're passing through their village. It's sort of like a that kind of like a hospitality invitation in a roundabout way. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll read the second one then. Number 2, my happiness. Since I grew tired of the chase and search, I learned to find. And since the wind blows in my face, I sail with every wind. I I believe that could also be pronounced wind. Uh, Seem to fit the rhyming scheme. Any
That's
comment
wind.
on that? Yeah,
Definitely wind. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I mean it's blowing in their face, so definitely wind. Interesting. I wonder if it's sort of meant to be like a cheeky slant, uh,
This is
sort of
the
poking fun at.
I'm not a seagoing person at all, but the little bit I know about sailing, you want to try and use the wind as much as possible, but sometimes it ain't blowing in the direction you want to go, right? And then you probably don't want to put your sail up.
Uh,
Here,
but
Nietzsche is
he,
saying,
but he could mean it as wind because it could be wind and wind because it's like for the sails you have to wind them up
Uh,
and
ooh,
wind them
okay.
down. But I don't know.
German would also and refer to wine like a clock or something.
I'm sorry, you're very quiet. Could you speak a little bit louder and more directly into whatever microphone you have?
Oh yes, is it more direct now?
Sounds a little better.
Okay, yeah. The German word binden can also mean to wind a clock up or something.
Interesting. Okay. It also sort of speaks to me of like winding back and forth along a path, right? And if the wind keeps blowing in your face and you have to keep adjusting your path to not sail directly into the wind, you would have a windy path. But does that work with the German?
Yeah, can we make sure that 82 is pardon me 92 is saying that they would like to hear both versions, so they want to hear
Okay.
the German.
give it a go. Number two's German is, seit ich des Suchens müde ward, erlernte ich das Finden, seit mir ein Wind hielt wieder Part, segel ich mit allen Winden.
Rubber Room Rat asks, what does the German say? I mean, theoretically, the the English is a translated version of the German, right? Just the German is going to have a little bit more direct rhyme scheme. So yeah, what do we think about wind here instead of wind in terms of like a windy path? Because I think that fits the theme as well, but it's also interesting because it's
Well, it makes me think of a lot about like aesthetics, particularly when it comes to like painting and other things in aesthetics, where it's like there's like this thing called like an S curve, right? And it's like to give the eye a merry chase, right? And it's like right, like that's kind of how it's described, particularly in British aesthetics, like with Burke, etc., and others. So it kind of makes me think of this, especially with the idea of a chase, right? It's like it's supposed to make you chase, right? Like at least in that sense, right? So yeah.
yeah, okay. And so how would what do you think that can tell us about some of what this poem is saying?
My interpretation, we got a. I think we should look to the titles of each of the poems. I think are
Right.
clues. Um, I, I would also make the suggestion that as we go through, the ordering of these builds are not
Okay.
sort of
Yeah.
idle or misplaced or just wantonly placed in here in any random order. Um, so there's an affirmation here about a positive thing that how Nietzsche, is happiness. And I see it as an affirmation of going with the wind, going with a force that you can make use of, irrespective of potentially the direction it's going to take you.
Yeah.
Yet,
Letting
I mean,
fate take you and not working against it, maybe.
yeah, I mean, like it's not like you are completely 100% powerless. I mean, sure, there's always the worst of all storms that you are insignificant in the sea, but on calmer days, the wind could be blowing a direction that might not be quite the one that you're interested in, but it's still you can make use of it. And good sailboats, other than a wind going exactly in the opposite direction, can make use of wind gusts that are at an angle or something like that, but you can still kind of steer yourself in the direction that you're after.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also anti uh, Odyssean in a sense, because it's instead taking like the concept of like the Odyssey and saying like the issue is the return with Telemachus and Penelope. Actually, it's the sailing around that's the most important, right? Like it is the friends we
Ooh,
made
okay, I
along
like
the
that.
way, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, I think that's a very good parallel to draw.
One thing I
Okay,
had
yeah.
a question on
Go ahead. Yeah.
for that one, and maybe I'm just confused, and maybe it's a translation issue, but with the wind blows in my face, that wouldn't that imply that he's going against the wind if it's hitting his face? And so it seems like it's kind of less that he's going with the flow of the or kind of the wind, but he's kind of going against it. It's tough because I'm kind of reading like a contradiction because when you say I sail with every wind, like, but when you add wind there, it has that kind of almost going against the wind a little bit and blows in my face. It's or am I misreading that perhaps?
Yes,
No,
but oh,
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, once you have a certain advancement in sailing, you actually can sail against a counter wind. It is possible to do that. Like So that is one of those things too. That it's like by winding up certain of the sails, right? You can even go into an opposing wind. Technically, like you can
Or
actually do that. So yeah,
and you can tack back and forth, which would be a windy path. That's sort of what I was.
Oh, yeah, that makes more. It's almost like a dancing with the wind than
Yeah,
necessarily just. That's cool. That makes a lot more sense. I need to know a little bit more. Have a little bit more nautical knowledge, I guess.
yeah. It's been a long time since I got my sailing license. I'm a little
Do you really
out
have
of
your
date on that one.
sailing license?
Yes, for a very very small, like the smallest possible sailboat, like with a sail. I think it's
Oh,
like a
geez, that's
14
cool.
foot. They teach you all sorts of fancy knots
Next
and stuff.
episode, coming from a harbor near you.
Okay, I'll read the English on this one, and Rumpel can follow it up with the German. Or would you prefer the other way around? You want to start with the German and then go to the English?
Sure. Unversagt. Undaunted. Wo du stehst, grab tief hinein, drunten ist die Quelle. Lass die dunklen Männer schreien, stets drunten, Hölle. Bug it there at the end. Over to you. I'm muted if you're talking.
Essen.
Sorry about that. My mouth was full of cinnamon roll. I can cut that out of the recording. Number 3, undaunted. Where you stand, dig deep and pry. Down there is the well. Let the obscurantists cry. Down there's only hell.
This is the Nietzschean keep digging. You're doing fine, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, seems a little more generic by modern standards, but down there is the well, I think, is kind of one of the key points of this one that jumps out to me. But in that case, it's kind of interesting because there's maybe some tension if we're saying the last one had to do with sort of placing the journey against the wind as the center. This one, it's saying down there is the well. So like you're trying to dig for water, right? You're trying to reach water.
Yeah. The first one I see is about finding a fair bit. Search. Oh, an odyssey, but not an odyssey. Quelle is, yes, you could say well. Quelle is also source, the source of something, the origin of something, where it flows
Okay.
from. So drunten ist die Quelle, down there is the source of it.
Okay. Interesting connotation. Or possible double meaning. And then obviously there's like an opposition here between his position of the continued digging and this sort of especially with the invocation of something like hell, uh, this sort of religious moral uh, backlash, right? Fear of what will be found.
Yeah.
what will be uncovered. Whatever scares the obscurantists. Very tricky word. Want to go ahead for number 4?
Zwiegespräch. War ich krank? Bin ich genesen? Und wer ist mein Arzt gewesen? Wie vergaß ich das alles? Oder ich alles das? B. Jetzt erst glaub ich, dich genesen, denn gesund ist, wer vergaß. So 4 dialogue. You want to do the English again?
Sure. Was I ill? Have I got well? Who was my doctor? Can you tell? Oh, my memory is rotten. Only now you're truly well. But those are well who have forgotten. Oh, this one's really pretty in English. So this one is a common thing I'm sure we'll come back to for Nietzsche. This theme of memory and illness. Both of them are huge themes throughout Nietzsche's work. And here he's asking sort of who he's gotten well, right? Who's his doctor? Rotten memory. And so it's this process of forgetting that's healed his sickness.
Is forgetting the doctor, or is it more the effect of getting better, is rather than kind of forgetting was the healer versus that's more of the kind of remnant of being healthy again?
Um, I think I would say more of the process of forgetting, letting go, but then there's more of a poetic turn that sort of personified it into the doctor, right?
Okay, I can see that.
But I would
I
say
mean,
it's very
the
much. Go ahead.
personification, I think, comes from this idea, right? Like, this is the same time period where um, autocrats, had a ring of doctors. Within 60 years of this event, you had the doctor's plot under when Stalin's health began to fade. Like, doctors were quite widely available to those who had money and who were heads of state, and you would have ideally really good doctors so that if you or anyone in your family became ill, they'd be looked after, and versus the kinds of healthcare, quote unquote, that your wider populace might have access to would be very different. I think it's less literal here, like, oh, memory or forgetfulness was my doctor per se. I think it's sort of more playing with how people would speak at the time. Right? There would also be this sort of great sense of, oh, well, if I was really ill and the prognosis wasn't good and someone helped me, then you would thank your doctor and etc. And your family would be very pleased with them and happy with them that they've done, um,
Okay.
they've done the magic to make you better, kind of thing.
So maybe more similar to how we'd maybe talk about like a cure. I found the cure. That kind of sort of.
Yes. Yeah, I'd read it
That,
much more in that kind of way rather than personifying the doctor with forgetfulness itself.
okay.
Because I think the idea here is Nietzsche would want to pronounce that forgetfulness is inherent in every human animal, and it
Yeah,
is a
I was saying
productive
sort of the.
capacity, right? So
Yeah.
resentment, which was mentioned in the comments, is here bang on, but also like as a purely protective capacity, there's only so much in terms of like calories our brains need in order to fuel what's going on up there. It's not a perfect memory chip. It's like you can just call it every time and get the exact, zeros and ones out, I guarantee. We're biological creatures. The Forgetfulness as a capacity has many benefits, both in moral sickness and in physiological sickness. I think Nietzsche would try to show that point to us as we go along.
Yeah, for
Getting a
sure.
bit ahead there.
I'm sure we'll reference these again as we go through the text and make sense of more of it through them. Do you want to go ahead with
We
the
had, a,
German?
we had a suggestion to do the English first and the German immediately after, so maybe we just switcheroo and I'll let you do the English first.
Sure. Either way is fine with me. To the virtuous. Why should our virtues be grave? We like ours, nimble-footed. Even like Homer's verse, they have to come and go.
Like Kaufman's note here, that is to say, our virtues should occasionally leave us in peace. I think that's quite a fair footnote and interpretation from Kaufmann here. Der German an die Tugendsamen, unsere Tugenden auch sollen leicht die Füße sich heben, gleich den Versen Homers müssen sie kommen und gehen. Yeah, so nice and simple. Just like the verses of Homer's, they must come and go. Yeah. Direct translation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Shakespeare's mention of the Odyssey, I think, extremely showing to be extremely poignant here. Yeah, exactly. And also in terms of our discussion of sort of winding through the wind, right? This nimble-footedness, I think, sort of speaks to some of the same thing of this switching direction, right?
Yeah, and it also seems like he's building on the previous poem in terms of like, when, uh, like as things go, they are forgotten, and I know that's overly bland of a comment to make on it, but the first time I read through this, I didn't really see how they were building, but I think actually reading it now, I mean, especially this one, it clearly is built on top of all four previous poems.
Do you want to speak to that, Shakespeare?
The way how I sort of saw it was when he's saying, "Why should our virtues be grave? We like ours nimble-footed." Because he specifically says, like Homer's verse, it made me think instead of the meter of Homeric poetry, right? That like why would we want ours to be so grave and so, I guess, like drab when we like ours nimble-footed, like in dactylic hexameter, that is to say, like heroic verse. And so that's why he says, like, even like Homer's verse, they have to come and go.
Oh, okay.
Like
Yeah,
he's
it's been a
also
long
trying
time
to
since
play with that too. Yeah.
I've learned any of the verse stuff. It's been 6-7 years. But that's very interesting. Yeah, have to. So, I wonder, they have to come and go. I wonder how that would build on this interpretation. Does the heroic verse in the Odyssey or Iliad come and go?
Yeah, because it's dactylic hexameter, so it's
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, the emphasis going and coming back. Okay, interesting. Thanks for the comment. Do we want to go on to number 6?
Yeah, let's do it. I think these are all, just as been commented again, that they're starting to build, and we're weaving a bit of a. There is meaning to be found in how they build. Loving the comments.
Worldly wisdom. Do not stay in the field, nor climb out of sight. The best view of the world is from a medium height. Would you like to
This
go
is a
ahead with the
banger.
German?
Yeah, the German's good here too. Weltklugheit. Bleib nicht auf dem ebenen Feld, steig nicht zu hoch hinaus. Am schönsten sieht die Welt von halber Höhe aus. And as someone who's been doing a lot of hiking this last couple of months, there have been some mountains that have been sold as being amazing, and they're just shit rock hill. It's like, why did I bother doing this? And then there are other times too when you're like walking up this silly ass mountain. Halfway up, there's just a clearing with just like this amazing view, and then you get to the top, and it's kind of a meh view with being buffeted by winds constantly, and it's way too sunny, and there's no shade. And you're like, actually, that point, like halfway up the hill, that was perfect. Like, it's much nicer than this. Um,
Yeah, often waterfalls as well are often like half or 2/3 of the way up a mountain, where there's enough ice melt on top. Often some of the prettiest spots, the little bit of standing water. But yeah, I mean, enlightened centrism W, says Nietzsche. I don't know. uh, Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Walzian says, it's funny Nietzsche is often depicted in paintings as on top of a mountain instead of halfway up. That is quite funny. Seven. What's this at all? Shakespeare, any help? Seems Latinish to me.
Oh, yes. Vadamecum vadeticum. I think it tells.
can't
I think it tells you what it literally says. Yeah, it's a guidebook. Yeah, go
yeah.
with
But in
me.
terms of pronouncing that, there's no way. My mouth
Yeah,
is
it's vademecum.
Vademecum.
Yeah, vadetecum. Like it literally means like
Vadetecum.
vente conmigo,
Okay.
like in Spanish, like come with me. It's like that is literally what it means.
Yeah, and Kaufman's note mentions this as well. Vademecum is a
Mhm.
manual guidebook, and Vadetecum is
Go with yourself.
go with me.
Yeah.
Oh,
The first one
the
is
first
come
one.
with me because it's mecum, and then tecum means you.
Okay, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Lured by my style and tendency, you follow and come after me. Follow your own self faithfully. Take time, and thus you follow me.
Let's say here too, the German is pretty well translated. So the German is: Es lockt dich meine Art und Sprach. Du folgst mir, du gehst mir nach. Geht nur dir selber treulich nach, so folgst du mir, Gemach, Gemach.
This one's reminding me of the end of the aphorisms in Twilight of the Idols. Uh, the questions of conscience. At least a little bit. The whole notion of like following, followers. Makes me wonder if some of those aphorisms were reflecting on some of this. I think, at least how I'm reading this is Nietzsche is sort of saying, be true to yourself and sort of come with me in your own time through that process. Yes, and Rumpel says not necessarily with speed. Yeah, sort of in a more winding path, we might say, or sort of this more roundabout and not necessarily speedy path. Maybe more of an exploration.
Would it be appropriate to read "Come After Me" in almost like a threatening tone? Because it's almost, when it's saying "come after me," it almost like invokes, at least for me, the not just doing your own thing, but in doing your own thing, you kind of surpass Nietzsche's project. Would that work in the German, or is that something I'm reading into from the English?
I would, in the sense that you're posing, I think you're right if you read it like as a challenge.
Okay, because I would read it more like a warning, like to follow to sort of follow me uncritically, right?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's 100% a warning, but then also there's a call to action in a roundabout way at the end.
Right.
And I would say that call to action is a challenge in the face of the criticism that you're like the warning, not criticism, the warning he's presenting in the first two lines effectively.
I sort of see it as also sort of an allusion to to the quote from the Christian Bible, "Quo vadis Domine," right? Because you know, whither goest thou, our Lord, right? To Jesus, and it being sort of something along those lines, because vademecum, vadeticum, it's like it's both follow me by following thyself, right? It's like it's a very uh, big allusion, I would say, to that biblical verse, particularly where you have the actual "Quo vadis Domine," because of follow yourself faithfully, take time, and thus you follow me. You know, et ergo, et ergo. You know, oh well, I mean, regardless of however you were to say it, but in essence, that would be the same thing, right? So I don't know. At least that's what it. I think that's
Yeah,
why.
that's
Yeah.
interesting.
That's very fair.
Could you expand a little bit? I'm not super into biblical studies. What would you think be some of the some of the context around the original or around the biblical quote there that he's maybe playing with?
Well, because um, he says, "Led by my style and tendency, you follow and come after me," right? And so, what the quo vadis domine is referencing is when Saint Peter is trying to flee persecution in Rome, that he sees Jesus, and then that's when Saint Peter, remember the one who rebuked him 3 times, in Jerusalem, etc., blah blah blah, right? Says, "Where are you going, my Lord?" Right? Like, so yeah, basically a Gemacht of followers of Christ. Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I feel like it uh, because Jesus then responds, "Eo Romam iterum crucifigi," right? Like, I am going to Rome to be crucified again. So it's like, but it's Peter who gets crucified, right? So it's like,
Ooh.
through that, right? It's like, lured by my style and my tendency, and you come after me, right? But um, to es Petrus, right? Well, anyway, I don't want to just keep talking in Latin, but yes, by following, like, what is your charge, right? To be the first among equals, right? The prime, the first pope, etc. Blah blah blah. Is that he becomes crucified, and then he becomes like Jesus. So yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great comments.
I agree with Rumpel here. He's sort of calling out uh, maybe sort of like a difference between like uh, a follower that's more of like a sheep or more of like a disciple, right? As opposed to um, one who sort of comes to the same conclusions through reflection and uh, careful thought and some of those other things, right?
Yeah, and I think that also works with the title too, because it's no longer about mecum, right, with me, right? It's tecum, right, with thyself, right? So
Right.
so it's
Yeah.
so it's Peter who turns around into Rome and keeps preaching Christ, this is gospel, on his own, and then gets crucified himself. So anyway,
Okay, let's go on to number 8. Shedding the third skin. My skin is crackling as the snake. Inside me lusts as if it had not eaten enough earth to slake its thirst with more earth between blade and and stem I crawl far from the beaten track, hungry and yet full of mirth, to eat what I have always eaten. You, fair of snakes, you earth.
The accompanying German. Bei der dritten Häutung. Häutung is a shedding. So you could, shedding of the third skin, or the shedding of the third, the third shedding. At the time of the third shedding, yeah. Sonn krümmt und bricht sich mir die Haut, sondiert mit neuem Drang, so viel sie Erde schon verdaut, nach Erd in mir die Schlang, sonn kriech ich zwischen Stein und Gras, hungrig auf krümmer Fährte, zu essen das, was stets ich aß, ich Slangenkost, dich, Erde.
And I had a quick note in terms of the third shedding. Generally speaking, that's when snakes reach maturity is their third shedding. So this is sort of like reaching maturity, right? Shedding the third skin. Is there German connotations for earth that are a little bit more apparent? I'm struggling a bit with this one.
I mean, you could use it in the sense of die Erde, die Welt, like the world that we live on, like a really immediate sense, through kind of a lot of multiple epochs, right? With multiple sets of like die Erde, the Welt, the world, under both like cosmogonies and cosmologies. You could rightfully use kind of that term to talk about the thing that we're on. Whether you have any scientific understanding of that it's around and that, you know, it goes around the sun or not. Um, yeah, I think there is a physicality to it, right? Stein und Gras, stone, which is kind of what like the earth is in part made of, the grass that grows on it. Um, yeah, and
And
like the idea of that it can be that it's consumable to a degree, right?
yeah. Between blade and stem I crawl.
Yeah, it's a weird. I wouldn't have picked the word blade.
That would be like a blade of grass?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, good point.
Far from the
'Cause the
beaten track.
translation's
Yeah.
kind of
So,
lost the stone to a certain degree.
okay. But yeah, he's talking
Zwischen
about sort of
Stein und
crawling through
Gras.
the
Yeah, between
vegetation.
the cracks, like between both the stone and the grass. But the translation seems to have gone between blade and stem, like between the blade, yeah, like it's sort of being suggested between the blades of the grass and the stem. So we've sort of missed the rock there in the translation.
Okay, yeah. Far from the beaten track, hungry and yet full of mirth. To eat what I have always eaten. It kind of seems like he's sort of talking about this uh, hunting, right? Tracking down food that is not in the normal path. Sort of more of like a hunger for the new, but new isn't quite the right word. Sort of for the exciting and the unexplored, right? That's what it's sounding like to me. But then he says to eat what I have always eaten. So I don't know if that's contradicting that.
Eaten what I've always eaten to me is a call to like an honesty of conscience.
Huh? Could you expand on that a little bit, Shakespeare?
Well, what I think is interesting here is that it says like my skin is cracking as the snake inside me lust, as if it had not eaten enough earth to slake its thirst with more earth. Right. So it's not as though the snake is exterior to the speaker of the poem. it's the snake within, right? And as if had not eaten enough earth. And what's interesting is that, of course, there is the fact that uh, one thing that Rumpel did notice earlier is that the Stein is taken away, and so it's blade and stem, as opposed to stone and stem. That it crawls. But I think, to me, this is just something like, one. There's, of course, the I guess how I'm seeing it is that it's sort of like ashes to ashes, dust to dust, right? That it's like it eats what is produced by the earth itself, right? So it's like, that is why it's an internal snake that is
Okay.
reached maturity, right? Is that it eats others, it eats all that is of the earth, right? That is the thing about it. It's not actually a snake that eats dirt. It eats what is of the earth, so to speak.
Yeah, some people are noting some references in chat, including Jormungandr, assuming I'm pronouncing that even close to correct, the world snake, Norse mythology.
Yeah, there
Also,
is
I
that
noted
too. And
I
if
also
that
noted
is
like
Mhm.
there's the connotation of like the devil being a snake. Lots of snake allegory there.
Yeah. But one thing it's interesting too is that the fact that it's talking about its thirst first. It says thirst, then it talks about hunger, right? Like, it's like an interesting thing to say that it needs to be sated first, like by something to drink, or at least using that term thirst, and then talking about hunger, yet full of mirth, right? Like joyfully on its search to eat what I have always eaten, you pharaoh snakes, you earth. Because one thing we could say, if we are going to look at it in the biblical sense, then we know that it's not humans, right? Because that is not what happens to the snake, which in the Christian tradition is viewed as the devil, but in the Jewish tradition is not. That it shall crawl upon the earth, right, and it shall be stepped on by the heel of the sons of Adam, right? So there's that. If it is the it could correlate with Zarathustra, but also with the Jormungandr. Then that makes me think of the Germanic goddess Erda, right? Who sort of like is asleep at the bottom of Yggdrasil, right? That then is invoked, right? But then I feel like then that's a whole nother, kind of worms that would have to be, but it's like, I think it's more about forces as opposed to like like literal things, right?
Right. I think imagine sort of going with this as a great comment. He could be stating the purpose of this book. Slowly, the snake inside will emerge and eat up the beliefs and value systems he's about to critique with his work. And also, the snake is depending on interpretation, the snake is the one that caused the fall. And so, in that sense, there's maybe a connotation of that as well. Yeah, great comment. Thank you. Imagine. Number 9. My roses. Yes, my joy wants to amuse. Every joy wants to amuse. Would you like to pick my roses? You want to go for the German? Oh wait, is there? Oh, this is. It keeps going. My apologies. Would you like to pick my roses? You must stoop and stick your noses between thorns and rocky views, and not be afraid of bruises. For my joy enjoys good teases. For my joy enjoys good ruses. Would you like to pick my roses? You want to go for the German, Rumpel?
Meine Rosen. Ja, mein Glück. Es will beglücken. Alles Glück will ja beglücken. Wollt ihr meine Rose pflücken? Müsst euch bücken und verstecken zwischen Fels und Donnerhecken, oft die Fingerchen euch lecken, denn mein Glück, es liebt das Necken, denn mein Glück, es liebt die Tücken. Wollt ihr meine Rose pflücken? Tease, right? It's still part of this sort of continuation of this invitation, but it's you're gonna be bruised. You're gonna get stuck on thorns and get a bit bloody, and you're gonna be licking your fingers a bit, but it might be worthwhile.
Still says so like KFC. Uh, uh, I can't help but think of this as like a cheesy Instagram poetry or pickup line type thing. uh, yeah. As you were
Anyone
speaking
wants
to,
to use
you
this
must
to serenade any love partners you have, please report back next week and let us know how it goes.
you must stoop and stick your noses between thorns and rocky views, and not be afraid of bruises. I think this is calling back as well to the poem about following and finding. I mean, it's calling back to many of them, but uh, especially with the "Would you like to pick my roses?" is sort of calling back to, for me, sort of this following along with Nietzsche, right? Like roses can also mean like sort of, doesn't it have to do with, is it victory? No. Uh, I'm thinking of like bread and roses. Yeah, I guess it depends on the color. But sort of like the hmm. Imagine notes. This quote by Abraham Lincoln. Uh, we can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because thorn bushes have roses. That's very clever. I like that. For my joy enjoys good teases. For my joy enjoys good ruses. Would you like to pick my rose? I don't really have much more to say about this one. I think that there are parts of it that are pretty self-evident that we talked a little bit about, but I think that's good there. Unless anyone else has more to add on this one. Is there a biblical reference or Shakespeare? Okay, I'll go on to number 10. Number 10, Scorn. There is much I drop and spill. I am full of scorn. You think? If your beaker is too full, there is much you drop and spill, without scorning what you drink. I want to go for the German Rumpel.
Der Verrechter. Vieles lass ich fallen und rollen, und ihr nennt mich drum Verrechter. Wer da trinkt aus zu vollen Bechern lässt viel fallen und rollen, denkt von Wein drum nicht schlechter.
I think this one is sort of a self-effacing, or not self-effacing, but sort of like a mild self-criticism, or maybe like a sort of a self-understanding is maybe a better way to put it. There is much I drop and spill. I am full of scorn, you think. Like very much speaking to Nietzsche's style of being very aggressive and petty and dismissive. And he's talking about that. If your beaker is too full, there is much you drop and spill without scorning what you drink. And I think that this speaks more to like him sort of admitting that he does, in a sense, have great respect for the history of philosophy, but that he himself is uh, sort of driven with his own path and his own work and his own overflowing of life. Right, his beaker is too full, and so there's much that you drop and spill and toss aside, perhaps, or yeah, there's much you leave behind, I guess.
I
So
have a like a technical question here. The I don't know if the word beaker used to mean something a little bit more general or something less specific. But beaker is a very, very, very specific word. You know, like I don't like it's for me it sounds strange. It's like about talking about like a science experiment or something, which is maybe the part of the point, but it's very little context to lead to some sort of a very precise, very like serious measurement or like whatever thing. The word beaker, like the word here could be any other kind of container. The word beaker here is very strange to me for some reason. Anybody
it's
else wanna?
Becher. Becher is like a vessel specifically to
Okay,
hold liquid.
okay,
So think cup. So you could ein
And
Glasbecher, ein
okay,
Holzbecher is like a
okay,
Glasbecher is a cup made of glass or a tumbler made of glass. A Holzbecher would be a mug made
okay.
of
You know,
like
yeah,
wood.
and
Yeah.
also
So it's not
um
beaker. I wouldn't read beaker in like a chem lab sense at all here. I would read it
yeah,
yeah,
in a
yeah,
like eating kind of like
uh-huh.
yeah, related
Yeah.
to
beaker
food, imbibing liquid.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
beaker is
think uh,
used
remember
generally in a more
originally
archaic
beaker.
sense.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it used to just mean like a specific type of cup made out of chemically neutral glass. That's all beaker meant before it
Okay.
became particularized.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what I kind of assume it to be. It's just a very general kind of glass container, right? Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Number 11.
Wait.
Proverb. Go ahead.
Wait. Before we move on, I just want to go back to the beaker thing. Could
Go
it
ahead.
be also be a reference? Sorry, I need to stop. A reference to like Zarathustra, right? It's like, oh, I am a man who is weary. I am like a bee who has collected too much honey, right? Like it's that same, right? It's like, oh, why would you leave the mountain, right? That's what the man that he meets right away is like, why would you leave, right? Like what's wrong? It's like what
Well,
is like
this was written before Zarathustra. Personally, I'm not super familiar with Zarathustra.
yeah. No, well, I mean, I
There
think
could be
to
a connection there
me,
for sure, though.
I definitely see that there because I think in that he's like, like, oh, is something wrong? Like, is something upsetting you? Like, are you angry or, like, what happened to you? Because then he goes into the town, right, where he says, Voice got, right? So,
Godspeed, you said, I think Nietzsche might have had it in mind already. Yeah, so the last book of the gay science is the beginning of Zarathustra. So it's sort of part of the same journey, uh, at least in the beginning.
Is there a way to see the German version side by side of the English version? Oh, thank you so much.
And it's the wrong pages.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it doesn't match though. But
That's. Is there any? I don't think there's a way I can fix that.
I mean, you could just share the screen and then put this PDF on side.
go back one page and see if it puts 45. No, it doesn't.
No.
Never mind.
Yet I'd have to like delete a page. Too much messing with things. That's okay. Yeah, unfortunately, we can't have the German side by side easily. I'm gonna go back to single page. So, US scroll. There we go. Number 11. The proverb speaks. Sharp and mild, rough and fine, strange and familiar, impure and clean. A place where fool and sage convene. All this I am and wish to mean. A dove as well as snake and swine.
I like this one a lot. The German's good. Das Sprichwort spricht, which is like a little bit of a play on words already. Sprichwort is the sort of the proverb, right? The sort of the saying. So the saying says, or the thing that we all speaks. Ja. Scharf und milde, grob und fein, vertraut und seltsam, schmutzig und rein. Der Narren und Weisen stell dich ein. Dies alles bin ich, will ich sein. Taube zugleich, Schlange und Schwein.
My question probably to the room would be, what does the dove, the snake, and the swine as animals provoke in us, and what other tales or stories, biblical or otherwise, might reference these animals?
Well, I know the dove and the snake at least a little bit. The dove would be peace generally, and also at the end of Noah's flood, I believe it's a dove. Unless it's a pigeon. Although I think pigeons are kind of dove. Forget now. But anyway, yes, a dove, and then swine. Not super familiar, if that's a biblical reference. Go ahead, Shakespeare. Waljian says, "Cast your pearls to the swine." Been a long time since I've heard that phrase. Matthew 7:6. Do not give that which is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, for they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Okay. Come on, Shakespeare. I don't know why you think everyone hates your comments. We all want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, fine, I'll speak. So what this seems to be referencing, at least in my opinion, is multiple things, but certainly the book of Matthew, but after the Sermon on the Mount, in which you have these different animals that are considered that you shall like I don't know. Well, for one thing, I guess I will say this. Just to when he says impure and clean, he's saying doves, snakes, and swines are all non-kosher. I'll just say that.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
Quick question: are doves usually associated with kosher or not kosher? Because usually people don't think about eating doves, right? Like, or is that?
Actually, people eat dove a lot, especially in Europe. But yeah.
Oh, the Frenchies. Yes. Okay. Now. Okay.
Handling
Interesting.
itself, like impure, just the pure handling and keeping of them.
Oh, and it seems like doves and pigeons are part of the same genus, so maybe that's why I was.
Yes. All pigeons are descendants of rock doves.
Ah, I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Let's hit the next one.
Sure. To a light lover. If you don't want your eyes and mind to fade, pursue the sun while walking in the shade.
Yeah, nice and
Very quick
simple.
one.
And einen Lichtfreund, so a friend of the light, is sort of like the literal translation. Willst du nicht Aug und Sinn ermatten? Lauf auf der Sonne. Start that again. Willst du nicht Aug und Sinn ermatten? Lauf auch der Sonne nach im Schatten.
So for here, I'm picturing it sort of literally, and it's I'm trying to figure out what is meant by pursue the sun.
Suit of, I think here, I mean, you could probably read metaphorically here as truth.
I'm not talking about even metaphorically, like in terms of like painting a picture. So like, because at first I was picturing, like walking. I think that there's an element of this that is sort of. I mean, maybe it just means like take a restful path. I don't know.
Do you remember the metaphor of the spoke Zarathustra? I forgot it, you
Do
know?
not.
It's been 4 years since I read the spoke Zarathustra. And I read the half of it. And there, he mentioned the light, right? He mentioned a similar metaphor like that in his novel.
Yeah, I think it's also speaking back to the one about the wind blowing in your face, and that discussion that we had around that one. There's again sort of this like directionality to travel, right? Going into the wind, or sailing into the wind, walking into the sun, but figuring out the way to do that so that it's sort of not destructive in the same way, right?
Well, in one sense too, if you don't mind me just commenting really quickly, I think also like the idea of like if you don't want your eyes and mind to fade, right? And that is to say, like with perception, along with say knowledge and all of these things, it's that like
And
you're
having a
not.
critical eye, right?
Yeah, but also like don't like like this idea of the like suburban home with all of that stuff too, right? It's like we could even talk about in the present, right? It's like there were people who like forced themselves into right into a kind of twilight, one might say, right? Um, uh, so I think that he's also saying that too, right? It's like if you actually love this stuff, right? Liebe, right? Then you have to actually keep continuing to try to find it. Otherwise, you will lose those very things which allow you to experience it, and then you will exist in an eternal dust, so to speak.
Okay.
Like that.
Yeah, I like that too. I'm trying to see how I can read that back into the poem. Yeah, there could be an allusion to Plato here. I think that that's an interesting note. Let's see. An allusion to Plato's sun. This could tie back to the true versus apparent world. Should not be blinded and life negating by the otherworldly true world, which is the sun in the allegory. You have to abolish this dialectic and recognize the apparent world as the only one, which is the shadows, the world of representations instead of the world of forms. Ooh, okay, I really like that connection. Oh, and Estelle said, or maybe Diogenes' son. Yeah, that's that famous questionably true story of Alexander the Great meeting Diogenes for the first time and asking him, he comes across him when he's having a nap in the sun, and he awakes him and asks him for, and offers him a favor of any kind. And Diogenes tells him to get out of his sun. He was having a lovely nap, something along those lines, paraphrasing. I don't necessarily, I don't know if I could draw a direct connection to that here. I would see the Platonic connection much more directly. But it's a very tricky one for one so short. Because in one sense, like physically speaking, if you're walking towards the sun, you're sort of necessarily getting the sun in your eyes. But if you find a way to do it less directly, a bit again, like we were sort of talking about with the sailing into the wind, tacking back and forth. That's sort of what it was reminding me of in the previous poem.
You know what this just also brought to mind? It actually makes me think of like the way how Oswald Spengler, the way how he described like the West, right? Because he described it as Abendslanden, right? Like literally like the evening lands, right? And that also kind of is like an interesting way of thinking about it too. Like, yes, the West is the Abendlande, right? Like, I don't know. I find that also kind of sticks out to me, where it's like associating the West with like the evening, whereas in this case, pursuing the sun would be, at least ostensibly speaking, right? Like going the other direction, right? Not towards the Abenslandes, right? So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I think that's interesting, especially in light of some of the snake and going your own path ones as well. I think that there's some interesting connections there. I think we'll move on to the next one for now. I'm sure that we can come back to some of these, and we'll see connections later on. Obviously, many of these are going to be very open-ended, right? So there's a lot to analyze.
The next set are all like this. We're moving into 2-line poems.
Number 13, for dancers. Smooth ice is paradise for those who dance with expertise.
Für Tänzer. Glattes Eis ist Paradies für den, der gut zu tanzen weiß. Oh, Paradise, ja. Oh, Paradies. So, glattes Eis, ein Paradies für den, der gut zu tanzen weiß.
Yeah, Nietzsche's style in some of these is very much like, here I have some thoughts. I know what they mean. Can you? Now it's time for you to do the work, or maybe not. I know what they mean, but I have an understanding. Now it's time for you to do the work. And also, anyone who's here, I know some of you are not necessarily used to the readings, but keep adding comments, adding them in chat, and feel free to unmute if you have a question. That's why these are awesome. Is lots of comments, being able to talk through things as a group. This one strikes me as pretty simple, at least for the time being. I'm trying to think of like. I presume that they had ice skating at the time, right? I have no clue actually when ice skating was. Because like skates. Yeah. Skates are a pretty old invention. Figure skating. Yes, figure skating was also a thing. Okay. Interesting. Figure skating competitions began in Hamburg, Germany. The first European championship was in Hamburg, Germany in 1896. So that would have been a little after Nietzsche's time, at least writing. Do you have anything to add here, Shakespeare?
It's almost fascinating that he kind of repeat the dancer, right? In some of his books, some of his works, right? So, what is the dancer like? Like, like, I don't know. Like, what is the dance, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, people are pointing out in chat the tightrope walker. Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely. I think that'll come up more as well. We'll be able to talk about that plenty. But the balanced tightrope walker, right?
I think it's interesting here because it almost seems like the precursor to being able to dance is to put yourself into danger, which is kind of the smooth ice there and kind of the falling there. It is almost a prerequisite in Nietzsche. In order to live, you have to be living kind of dangerously. And earlier was talking about bruises and stuff. That's all kind of, I think, encompassed within his conception of the dancer.
Yeah. I think that's a great connection here.
Last one.
Okay. Without further ado, then I guess I'll move on. Number 14. The good man. Better a wholehearted feud than a friendship that is glued.
So the German here is great. Der Brave. Brave is. I wouldn't translate it as the good man. Brave is someone who obeys. The obedient is kind of what I would have used here as the translation. Lieber aus ganzem Holz eine Freundschaft als eine geleimte eine Feindschaft. So, lieber aus ganzem Holz eine Feindschaft als eine geleimte Freundschaft. So in German, when you speak about building something out of wood, it's like um, it's the proof of concept at most. Or it's rickety and like you should have used steel. Like you're just not using the right materials. It's kind of shaky foundations. To build the
Right.
entire thing out of wood is kind of the idea. Lyman is gluing, um, and something that you would do with wood. Als zu leimen is to glue wood together. Nice and short, but succinct, and uses sort of very material, um, kind of day-to-day concepts that everyone would have been familiar with. Like your everyday person on the street would fully understand, like sort of the literal meaning of this immediate, like from a translation perspective.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the only real one is Der Brave. I don't, the good man. But if you're going to translate it to the good man, then it's far more about obediency and fitting in and sticking to the rules.
Yeah, it's more like well-mannered, like the well-mannered man,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if
So
anything. Yeah.
it should almost be like in quotes then, huh?
Yeah.
At the least. I wonder if something like the civilized man would be a better translation then. If it's like well-mannered, but also obedient. But maybe that has too many different connotations as well. Yeah, and I think that, as people are pointing out in chat, this sort of speaks to his style within philosophy as well. Number 15. Rust. You need some rust. Sharpness does not suffice. Else you will seem too young and too precise.
Jo. Rost. Auch Rost tut Not, scharf sein ist nicht genug, sonst sagt man stets dir vor, er ist zu jung. I really like Imagine's comment, kind of picking up off the last one too. Iron sharpens iron. Nietzsche takes ideas and critiques past philosophers.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of the last one too, I think wholehearted is an interesting choice of words, assuming that that lines up with the German as well, where it's not just a feud of sort of insignificance, right? Like a bickering or an argument. It's a wholehearted feud, right? It's something that has the whole force of your personality behind it, right? But anyway, on this one, uh, any notes on translation, or is it pretty much all there? Jody says, could be talking about being humble. If you always present yourself as super precise and accurate, you come off as a machine or charlatan. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at this. Sharpness does not suffice, right? You also need some rust. So in that sense, he's sort of talking about experience, but also experience in sort of the sense of like age and rustiness and a sort of a slight breakdown, right?
Yeah, on that breakdown, I think that's interesting that you said breakdown specifically, because it's interesting later on Nietzsche in the gay science talks a lot about like almost like criticizing philosophy for being kind of just a bunch of old guys who are dying, and they're kind of retrospectively being like, oh, like now that my life's over, here's philosophy. And so philosophy doesn't have that life in it. And so this aphorism in particular was always stuck with me, that kind of that you still do want some damage though at the same time. And so it's a weird kind of contradiction. I think just I don't necessarily have an answer for it, but just as we go on, when he talks kind of about the importance of not philosophizing sick, or at least recognizing that, kind of also keeping in the back of your mind that it's also necessary to have some level of kind of brokenness here.
I think that we could relate this back as well to some of the lines about health earlier in the introduction, where he talks about different philosophies being so many different states of the body, right? Differences in health. Here, I'll find the line exactly. A philosopher who has traversed many kinds of health and keeps traversing them has passed through an equal number of philosophies. And so I think here we could relate that he cannot keep from transposing his states every time into the most spiritual form and distance. I think that this could be sort of speaking to some of the same things, where we're talking about sort of this rust and this damage, but in a sense, it makes the blade even more deadly, right? Rather than the sort of the precise blade of one disconnected from.
When did tetanus shots become widely available?
Much later, I presume. Let's see.
Yeah.
I like this analogy because it reminds me of the critique of the Goethe program, right? When Marx writing Capital, right, in 1875, he kind of reporting his doctor because he has some critical condition, right? And he was he was kind of sick while he writing Capital, right, which is a big thick book, like big, like 800 pages. But like it shows you that like what Nietzsche talking about is interesting, I guess, from back when you connected the dots between this and like the rust. You see also the rust of the writings of Marx, right? Like the spectacle, the rust, the words that Marx, like in Capital Volume 1, kind of haunting us, right? So I don't know. I don't know. It could be talking about like all philosophers, right? And yeah, like Socrates or like Marx.
Yeah, and I wonder if, in a way, he's sort of criticizing some. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of ways that you could read this as a criticism of philosophy that doesn't have some rust, or sort of a self-effacing, talking about the way that he was, because at this time he was still quite young, but especially when he had written the Birth of Tragedy, he was extremely young. I mean, he was the youngest on the what is it the youngest professor of philology at the time, and so like I think he could be pointing to some of his own experiences in academia, where it's sort of seen as a naivety to be critical, to have a critical edge to your sword, because there's this like level of precision and sharpness that hasn't yet been tempered, right?
Yeah.
I think that there's several ways that we could read this in.
Even a little, like a hint that there's wisdom with being a rusted-on curmudgeon, to a degree.
Yeah, but it kind of, like I said, it sort of depends on which way you take this, because you could almost take this as like him sort of making fun of that mindset as well, sort of saying people don't even take you seriously until you're
Until you are the rusted-on curmudgeon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I like it.
Make a note of this one, and we can come back to it. I'll definitely see if there's any more allusions to this.
Love this next one too. Back to like hiking,
I think I'm actually gonna. How long have we been going for? I think I'm gonna wrap up here actually.